in the vicinity of Fruta, which is a small town, and I've taken a turn onto a small road that goes into the Capitol Reef National Park. The area I'm driving through here used to be a ranch. They had fruit trees, corrals, pastures, homestead. They had what they needed to survive in this relatively hostile environment. You can see from the presence of the trees to the left, there was water available. And water availability is crucial for people trying to survive in this desert environment. So I arrived at an intermediate destination on the way to Hanksville. This is going to be a busy day. I'm in the Capitol Reef National Park, and you can see the rugged desert landscape and the big cliffs behind me. This is an interesting location because it has a history. In this area, uranium was discovered years ago, and there was a time that this was a uranium mine. This is no longer active, but it's something as a part of our history, so I get to take you to a uranium mine. So I've walked a little closer to these abandoned uranium mines, and we're going to go right up to them. When the National Park Service took control of this area, they knew that there was going to be a problem with radioactivity and the public, so they wanted to mitigate that risk. One of the suggestions was these should just be sealed up. One of the problems with sealing up a cave like this is what lives inside that cave. In spite of the radioactivity in that area, bats use that cave to roost. So they realized, based on their studies, that they couldn't just cover over the opening because that would trap the bats and eliminate that habitat. So the decision was made to put up bars to keep the public, like you and me, out of that cave. They didn't want us in there, but they wanted the bats to be able to fly out in the evening to forage. So they set that up. And so we're going to go up to these rails that were set up to allow bats to come and go, but keep the public from climbing into those abandoned uranium mines. So this little radiation detector tells me that there is significant radiation here in this location. Not enough that I need to be panicky and running for cover, but enough that it would be completely inappropriate to set up a tent and camp right here. The amount of radiation one absorbs from a source like this is related to how close you are and how long you're exposed to it. I wouldn't want to stay here long term. More importantly, I would not have wanted to work in this mine back when it was a mine and back when people were extracting uranium from the ground. Thought I'd give you a little flavor of what it's like in the Capitol Reef National Park. Rugged beauty, I think, is the description that comes to mind. It's a popular place for people to come for hiking, rock climbing, exploring. Even though it's popular, it's remote enough that it's not just always mobbed with people. So I'm going to drive from here to Hanksville. That's going to be the place I'm going to stay tonight. And there is a state park a short drive from Hanksville that's my destination for this afternoon. It should be fun and interesting. This is a place where people pull over in a parking area and look at some petroglyphs. That's what the sign refers to as petroglyphs. Now, if that sign is correct, that would mean that pictures are pecked into the surface of the sandstone. I'm assuming that these are ancient inscriptions dating back to somewhere between 800 AD and 1300 AD, the Fremont people. Looks like a lot of people are in the area to inspect these petroglyphs. On this wall behind us, there are several petroglyphs. That is, images that have been pecked into the sandstone. There are several human-shaped figures over here, and then over there are several mountain goat figures. Now this camera has a very wide-angle lens, so I don't expect you to see anything. However, these snapshots will show you exactly what these petroglyphs look like. Now these are very different than what I showed you yesterday, because that was a pictograph. Yesterday, the human figures were created by applying a red dye to the canyon wall. These images are pecked into the surface, so these are petroglyphs. Well, I'm learning to pay attention. I was talking to a couple of ladies at those petroglyphs, and she said, "Did you see the ones on the boardwalk?" And then she gestured down in this direction. So it's time for a little adventure, a little short walk. It's very nice here. You can see the trees around me are cottonwood trees. And if you saw yesterday's video, you know that cottonwood trees in the desert, in a desert canyon, mean the presence of water. I don't see any water on the surface, but you know that there's water here because cottonwood trees need water. I felt compelled to make a little short video clip here to give you a view of this Marsscape. There is no vegetation. It is dry and very rugged. Just an amazing landscape. It was only a few miles back. I was in a river canyon surrounded by lots of fruit trees and cottonwood trees. It was lush, beautiful, and now we're basically on the surface of Mars. You don't have to drive very far to see a radical change in the countryside here in this part of the U.S. We are in Utah's Goblin Valley State Park. I arrived perhaps an hour ago and looked around, took some pictures, and then I took out the drone and made some drone footage. In order to fly a drone in a place like this, you have to have a permit and you have to follow state and federal laws. I'm a commercial drone pilot, and so I know the rules and follow them scrupulously. And then I checked in with the visitor center and got a briefing on local requirements so that I can comply with them. Behind me is Valley number 1 in the Goblin Valley State Park, and you can see a bunch of rock formations that people call hoodoos. That is, they're stacks of globular forms produced by erosion over a very long period of time. This location is deemed to be very unusual, kind of otherworldly, and so it has been used for movies in the past. Here we are flying the drone over the Goblin Valley. We're about 30 feet above ground level. If you look just to the right of center, there are a couple of people walking among the hoodoos. That gives you an idea of the scale. It's as if we're floating over the hoodoos. I needed to plan this trip to avoid flying too closely to those folks because of safety and also because of etiquette. They came to a state park to enjoy the park, not be harassed by a drone. So in order to not interfere with their visit, I stayed away from them and high enough that I probably went completely unnoticed. Okay, so I am walking down into the Goblin Valley. I figured if we've flown over these hoodoos and I've given you a picture of them from above, why not come down and give you a closer society with these hoodoos? Well, now we're down in the Goblin Valley State Park, down among the hoodoos. All these strange looking rock formations around us. They're everywhere. I want to take a closer look at these structures and see what they appear to be made out of. This appears to be sandstone, but this appears to be sun-dried clay. So there are different layers here, and they erode at different speeds. This is sandstone, and it's eroding more slowly, but this is just sun-baked clay, and it is more easily eroded. So that makes sense. We have different layers, and they're going to erode at different rates, and that would result in these strange formations. That totally makes sense. Some of these formations seem very unlikely. This one coming up behind me looks like it's a little top-heavy. And it's foreseeable that at some point in the future, that's going to topple. But not today, hopefully. When something looks that precarious, I give it a wide berth. I'm not gonna stand under something that looks like it might be a little unstable. I've never been here before. I've been to the town of Hanksville, but we were on the way to the eclipse, and it was just a waypoint, and we were about 35 miles from this state park, but we didn't have time budgeted for this excursion. So now a year later, I'm back to visit this park. The suggestion to come here was actually provided to me by a friend of mine. I told her that I was planning on a trip to Utah, to the desert, and listed a few places I was going to go, and she said, "Oh, you must go to the Goblin Valley." And I thought, I don't really know where that is. And then in the recesses of my thought process, I remembered these funny hoodoos. And I thought, oh, she's talking about this place. So I actually added extending my itinerary to come see this place. I'm glad I did. While I was looking around here, I picked up a piece of soil, and mindful of the fact that these hoodoos have different layers, I've identified some of those layers as being high clay soil. And this is a piece of high clay soil. It breaks in these angular fractures. It's very hard. And this is actually an important substance for people living in this area. It is known that the Fremont people who lived here more than 1,000 years ago lived in pit houses. They wore moccasins that presumably they made from deer hide. We know that there are deer in the area because I saw one on yesterday's hike. We also know that they made pottery. They made thin wall gray pottery pieces that they used in their day-to-day. Pottery turns out to be very important for human civilization because it provides a lot of benefits. Pottery can be used to store water, carry water, store food. Pottery can be used for cooking. It's part of the day-to-day housewares that were available to a pre-Columbian civilization. Now there's a nice word, pre-Columbian. In the United States, we recognize that there was a big event when Columbus introduced the Americas to Europeans. Now, arguably, the Vikings were here long before that, but the Viking visits didn't result in a mass migration and a huge change in the population. It was actually the discovery of America by Columbus that got the word out and got a bunch of Europeans over here. So when we're talking about history in the Americas, you can split that history before Columbus and after Columbus. So if you want to concisely say before Columbus, you say pre-Columbian. So with that, we can describe the Fremont people in this area making their thin wall pottery as pre-Columbian people living here. This is an extraordinary place. It's very unusual. I could even say that it's unique. But it's not one of those places that I'm likely to return frequently. It's one of those places that I'm glad I came, but at this point I think I'll move on and look for other places to explore. I don't expect to come back here next year or the year after. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.